Hello, it's Alexia here. Now, I want to answer a question I've had from somebody around using head trash clearance, because I feel this is something that a lot of people will come across. And so I want to help you to work through this. So this is the question I've had. I've done a few of the mantras provided and I've watched videos, and unfortunately, I'm not feeling any change afterwards. So not sure if I'm doing them right, etc., etc. So not feeling any change afterwards. So the thing that is really useful to bear in mind is what are you expecting to see a difference in or notice a shift in, and what are you working on? So, for example, if you have a fear of spiders and you do a spider fear clearance, then you're going to be able to notice that pretty much straight away the minute a spider appears, because you're going to notice a shift in how you respond to the spider. Or if you go for having an injection, when I was in a hospital setting and ready to have an injection, I did the fear clearance before going in, and then I had a very different response to that injection that I had my whole life, and I used to just faint and collapse and have panic attacks and all that, and suddenly I'm sitting there super calm. So I was able to see a shift very quickly on the clearance that I've done. Whereas if you're going to do a clearance on a value, for example, like respect or control or independence, things that create these conflicts within us that are really important and show up, and it's the reason that those conflicts are there, that they create the environment for a fear to be very strong for you, then when you do an individual clearance like that, it's a very subtle shift. And it requires you to be in another situation where respect is present or lacking for you to really notice how that has shifted for you. So this is why I'm inviting you to be really clear about what is your expectation before you sit down to do your clearances versus what are you working on, and therefore what are you expecting to change. So I have a lot of people that I support and work with who suffer from tocophobia, which is extreme fear of birth and pregnancy. Now, in that situation, you could imagine that, well, I'm just going to work on my fear of pregnancy, and then once I've done that, surely I don't have the fear of pregnancy anymore. Well, no, because a fear of pregnancy or birth is actually a multitude of lots and lots and lots of different things. And in my experience, in order to heal something like tocophobia or anxiety, those kind of conditions that you go, well, I just worked on anxiety. Why am I still anxious? No, anxiety or tocophobia or any of these conditions like that they're lots of things at once. They're a multitude of different conflicts and fears and things that are going on. So you might do 2 clearances, 3 clearances, 5 clearances, and not notice any change in your anxiety or your tocophobia or your other sort of global condition. And that's because you need to do all the component parts, all the clearances that mean that this is a thing for you, for it to collapse, for you to notice a shift. So if you're noticing or you're not noticing any change in how you're feeling, then the first thing that I would be asking you is, well, what are you working on? And what were you expecting? What's the overall aim that you have with doing your head trash clearance work? And to give you some examples, like if you have anxiety, then typically people that have anxiety, when we break that down and identify all the component things that create that for them, that make it a thing that they suffer from day to day, that might show up as panic attacks or poor sleep or jumbled thinking, lack of mental energy, very fearful to all things and super anxious, that's how that can manifest for some. Then that's going to be a multitude of things that are going on. So for people suffering with that level of anxiety, they're going to have 50 to 70 different things to clear in order to eliminate that anxiety. So that's a lot, right? So if you're like doing 3 and you go, well, I'm still anxious, then no, and I hate to break it to you, but you've got a bit more work to do than just 3 clearances. If you've done 3 clearances and you're trying to get rid of your fear of spiders, then I'm like, maybe, let's see how you're doing it. Maybe you're not doing it correctly. Maybe there's something going on there that you're not, that you've got the wrong end of the stick. Or maybe this technique isn't for you, and therefore you need to try something else. I've personally, with all the emails and I've been doing this for over 10 years, and I get a lot of questions. I've published 2 books sharing this and lots of online materials, and I've worked with many, many clients. And I haven't had a direct experience of working with somebody or somebody using it saying, well, I've just, I've spent, whatever long on this and nothing's worked. It's just not doing anything. So I haven't personally come into that. But as with a lot of modalities and healing approaches, there are just some things that work for others and not for others. So it could just be that for you. So the next thing to do is to try and understand whether or not there is something shifting for you. I mean, maybe you're not noticing the change consciously, but remember the work that we're doing here with head trash clearance, it's an energetic process. It's an energetic release. So you might not notice the work consciously, especially when it's something, if you've just worked on a value like independence or respect or control. People generally do notice something going on, but it can be incredibly subtle. And if you're not looking out for it, you might miss it. And I say that because I've also seen that happen a lot with my clients where, I've kind of said to them, right, you need to work on these 4 things by the time we see each other next. And then we get on the call and then I'm like, how's it going? What's happened, with whatever's going on. And there's one story I want to share with you where there was a guy I was working with, and he was really struggling with a troublesome boss. He was wanting a pay rise. She wasn't giving it to him. She was being a bit of a bully. It was a bit problematic. And he was really lacking in confidence as a result of that. He was thinking about looking for another position. And so there was a lot tied into what was going on. So he had his things to work on. And so I said, well, okay, so how's it going? He was like, oh my God, amazing. I put in a request for a pay rise. They're looking at it and it's really, really great. And my boss I think she was looking to move. So suddenly there was an opening created and suddenly things were really unlocking in quite a remarkable way in his workplace. And then a separate part of the conversation, I said, okay, so now let's just get back to the clearance work that you've done. Talk to me about the clearance work. How did that go? Oh yeah, I did that, but I didn't really notice anything. I'm like, hang on a minute. You just told me that you've just put in requests for a pay rise, which you've not been able to do for like a year. And they're looking at it. This was never a thing that you were able to even contemplate before. And you're telling me there's no shift. And he was like, ah, right. So he just hadn't seen the impact of the change. And I'm sharing that with you because when you do a clearance, because you're no longer making an effort to change, it's just who you are now. You've just cleared something out the way. The thing that was blocking you in front of you is not there. So you're now able to move forward. Before, you might have been trying to move forward and there would have been an effort involved because there's this thing in front of you that was getting in the way. And so you would have to move out of the way. And there's this resistance, struggle, pushing, effort required to take that step forward. Once there's nothing in front of you and you can just kind of wander on forward, you're not really aware that you're just kind of having a stroll. You're just getting on with what you wanted to do. Whereas before you kept hitting something and it wasn't working. We've now cleared that out of the way. But now it's not there because you're not making this effort, because you're not hitting resistance, because you're not hitting anything. It's just your new reality. And as far as you're concerned, there was never a block there anyway. You're just getting on with stuff. And that might feel like nothing's changed. But until you kind of stop and go, hang on, I've actually been struggling with this for a while and now I'm not. So it is about really raising your level of self-awareness. So at the beginning of the process, the one thing I invite you to do is to write down, how is this showing up for you? When you're clearing something, let's say you're working on control and not being in control. How does the idea of not being in control affect you? Like, how does that show up for you? How does it make you feel in your body when you're not in control? When somebody else wrestles control out of you? When you're in a situation that feels like it's totally out of control? How does all that manifest? How does it show up here? How does it show up in your body? These are really important clues And they're really important for you to be aware of how this thing affects you right now before you go into the clearance, so that when you have done a clearance, you can check back in, look at your own handwriting and go, right, this is how this affects me. Because if you don't do that, you haven't got a reference point to compare yourself, because when you're the new you, you can't relate to that old you anymore. You can't, it's not you anymore. You've deleted it, you've overwritten it. And it takes having to read your own handwriting that you wrote only 20 minutes ago to realize how far you've come in 20 minutes. And if you hadn't seen your own handwriting, you probably wouldn't believe it, that you thought those things and you looked at it like that and you felt that way. So it's always important to write down how this thing shows up for you before you sit down and do your clearance. Rate it out of 10, because that's really important to have a number. Then once you've, you could then spend half an hour doing clearances. You read what you've written and go, yeah, no, I still think all that. Yeah, that's still how I feel. Nothing, I've just wasted half an hour. Then maybe you have just wasted half an hour and this process is not going to work for you. And that's okay. You've tried it out, had half an hour, it's not worked. Great, go and carry on and go and continue with your search for something else that's going to work for you. But you need to make sure that when you're checking in to see if it's worked, that you're checking the thing that you've just worked on, and you're not trying to see whether or not you've noticed a shift in this bigger condition that you're tying into these 2 clearances that you might have just done. So it's about having realistic expectations. It's about being clear on what you're working on. It's about having a high level of self-awareness so that you can check back in with yourself. And it's about being in a situation where you can check whether you have shifted. So with the spider situation, it's very easy to check if you've dealt with your fear of spiders, because you just need to go and find a spider and see how you react. I always remember the first time I went to find a spider after doing my clearance. I was like, oh my God, like before I was like finding big washing up bowls, big dictionaries, putting it on top. No, imagining that the spider could lift all that out and come running out and chasing me down the corridor at home, ridiculous sort of phobic response, to having done the clearance, going into my bathroom, seeing one in the bath and going, oh, look, there's a spider in the bath. Oh, there's no way I would have thought, oh, cute before. I'd be like, oh my God, shower that away, get me out of here. So very easy in that situation to see how you've shifted. Less obvious when you've just healed how you feel about being dependent on somebody else. Okay. So yeah, this is what I'm inviting you to do, is to become curious, raise your level of self-awareness, and be realistic about what it is that you're expecting to change, and whether or not the things that you're working on are actually the things that you need to be working on personally. I provide a lot of DIY ready-made kits, tools, mantra sets for people to be able to just start clearing stuff quickly without feeling overwhelmed with whether they're doing it right and all of that. But sometimes you might just be working on something that's not yours to clear. This is why it's really important up front to tune into it and see how it feels for you. If you've got like a 10 out of 10 intense reaction to the thing, it's probably one for you to clear. If you're not picking up anything on that thing, it's probably not one of yours. So it's a culmination of all of those factors that you need to take on board if you're not seeing any of the results that you are expecting. Okay, so I hope that that was helpful. If you have any more questions about using head trash clearance and you'd like me to help you to get through them and better understand what's going on, then don't hesitate to get in touch. Okay, bye for now.